So we're at the beginning. We're still relatively at the beginning of B'Shalach. I had to go back and see what we had done, and let me welcome those who are tuning into this. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And so just to let you know that this coming Shabbat, of course, we're going to be reading the portion not for Chol HaMoed Pesach, Shabbat Chol HaMoed Pesach, but rather Yom Tov, because it is it's the seventh day of Pesach, and so we're reading that. Let me find the place where we are. And we did some of this some months ago. We started it, and I believe we're on verse 20. I went back to find what we had recorded, and this is what I found. So we're very beginning. They've just left Egypt, and we're reading about their very first journeys. And so here we go. Vayis'u misukot, they journeyed from Sukkot, vayachanu ve'etam, and they encamped in Etam, b'ktzei hamidbar, at the edge of the wilderness. There is Rashi on this. Here we go. Vayis'u misukot, they journeyed from Sukkot. Beyom hasheni, this would have been on the second day. Shehare barishon, because on the first day, the Exodus took place, on the first day. Ba'u, they came, mi Ra'amses leSukkot. They came from Ra'amses leSukkot. So what we're doing is we're detailing out the actual stages of their journey as they move up towards the Red Sea. I'm going to editorialize just for a moment, because I was meditating, thinking about the significance of the Red Sea between, the Exodus itself and Egypt. And that if, in fact, this is a grand story, that the whole story of the Exodus from slavery is actually a grand metaphor for our liberating ourselves from our own personal slaveries. It seems to me like the Red Sea crossing is that moment, and you'll see, or you eventually will see, I suppose, if not this year, that basically God says you'll never be bothered by the Egyptians again. Once they've crossed the Red Sea, it's done. And I'm thinking to myself that if we get what it is to liberate ourselves, and if we in fact start that process, very soon into that process, I mean, the initial energy that we have in achieving that process, what happens is psychologically, we get tempted to go back to where we were. That in a sense, crossing the Red Sea is a moment we can have a lot of false starts, and crossing the Red Sea represents a moment when we really are liberated from those self-enslaving habits. And that's what the Red Sea represents. And its difficulty, the difficulty to get through that stage is represented by the crossing of the Red Sea. Just a thought that occurred as we prepared for this particular section. So, here we go. Next verse, 21. Vashem holech lifnehem, and Hashem journeys before them. Sorry, oh my gosh. See if I can somehow get that page straightened out. All right. Let's see, here we are. Lan chotam haderech, to show them the path, to guide them in their path, the Laila, and at night, ba'amud esh, and at night with a pillar of fire, laha'ir lahem, to give them light, to shed light upon them, lalechet, or to it would really be to give light for them, lalechet yomam v'layla, so that they could journey day and night. Rashi gives us, as you know, once in a while, Rashi will give us a grammatical analysis for the Hebrew. He'll get into the Hebrew itself, and that's what he does here. This phrase, lan chotam, and he says, lan chotam haderech, to guide them in the way. He says, notice, nakud patach, okay, that usually the lamed, which means two, notice right below, right? There's a similar lamed. It's what is called it's a prefix that stands for a preposition. La stands for two or four, okay? So it's not le nachotam, but lan chotam. And he gets right down and dirty in terms of the grammar here. And grammar in Hebrew is dikduk. That's the word for grammar in Hebrew. And ledakdek means to essentially get very particular, to parse, you might say, right? To really analyze the word itself. And that's the nature of grammar. But ledakdek is the verb. So he says that there is a patach, that's this vowel underneath the lamed is called a patach. This is called a shavah, an sound or a silent. Sometimes it's silent. What's interesting is that word has become anglicized, and in English we talk about a schwa, and it refers to this kind of sound. And this is a kamatz, this T-looking thing. So this is a long vowel, an ah sound. This is a short vowel. At any rate, he says it's there, lan chotam. It's not le han chotam. Shehu kamo lahan chotam, because the word itself is lahan chotam, to guide them. And this hey here, lahan chotam, if you'll bear with me in terms of getting very technical here, is an indication of a hifil. That is a construction of a verb in Hebrew. There are 7 constructions, and one of those constructions is a causative, that when you cause something, so in other words, to guide someone, you're causing them to go, you use this hifil form. But the hey is missing, and essentially that hey is elided, and he's telling you this. Now, let me just keep going. So he gives you some other examples. Kamor, and he gives you the in Deuteronomy Aleph, lar otchem. So lar otchem, to show you. From ra'ah, to see. Lahar ot is to show. So I hope you get the sense of how that hifil form, that's what it's called, is causative. Lar otcham b'derech asher telechu ba, to show you the way in which you should go. So again, there we have this patach underneath the lamed. Okay, so he says kamo. It's as if it were saying lahar otchem. So instead of lahar otchem, it becomes elided into lar otchem. Afkan, and so here too, lahan chotam. Here it is to guide them, al yedei shaliach, by means of an agent. Umi hu hashaliach, and who is this agent? Amud ha'anan. It is the pillar of cloud. V'hakadosh Baruch Hu, and the Holy One, blessed be He, bichvodo molicho lifnehem. But it's not just this cloud acting by itself. It is because the Holy One, in His glory, bichvodo, in His glory, which again, by the way, when you use this word kavod, you are talking about the immanency, the presence of the divine. So in a sense, and I learned this many years ago, actually I was at Temple of Aaron in Minnesota in St. Paul when we had a visiting lecturer, and I remember distinctly him sharing this interesting piece, that the opposite of kavod is kadosh. And kadosh, of course, we translate as holy, but that word connotes God's transcendence, God's otherness, God's overarching presence, God's distance and difference. And kavod has to do with God's immanence. So we have transcendence and on the other side, imminence. At any rate, so God is very present. Molicho lifnehem. He is causing this cloud to go before them. I'll stop.
What about the meaning of kavod or kivet as heavy?
Yes, it is definitely related, Judith. It does have to do with a presence. In other words, that sense of being present, of us being in that presence that creates perhaps emotionally. Can we talk about it? Heaviness, respect. Kavod is also very often translated as respect. So sometimes, we actually use a Latin word. We say gravitas, right? In other words, there's a seriousness of being that, and these all sort of are related. And the heaviness is perhaps more of an emotional, trying to describe an emotional feeling of the present. When something's heavy, when you're holding something heavy, you're very conscious of it, right? When something's very light, you might not even notice it. So I hope that's making sense. So we have a little bit more time. Let me see if I can get to the end of the sentence. Umikol makom, and nevertheless, et amud anan, he's referring now, of course, to the pillar of cloud. Hechin, he prepared lahan chotam, to guide them al yado, and al yado would mean by him. Okay. Me shehare. The Hebrew is very difficult to print. It's very hard to read, but I believe it's. Make sure that I'm reading this. Oh yes, okay. Shehare al yedei amud hanan him, because they were being guided. They're going by means of this pillar of cloud, right? So we have God's presence, but God's presence isn't visualized, and God uses this agent, right? And which is, by the way, the basic meaning of malach, of angel, has the meaning of agent, that somehow it is an intermediary between the divine and our own experience, that there needs to be some sort of intervening presence for the divine. Amud Anan, okay, he says the pillar of cloud, Eno Leora, was not there for light, Ela Lehorotam Haderech, but simply to show them the way. And I will stop here and allow you, if you will, to maybe share any thoughts you have about this. So there we go.
Isn't there a line in the Haggadah that says "Ani velo malach, ani velo"?
Yes.
Something, ani velo something.
Yes.
So I can't remember exactly where that comes in, but it's like saying, "I'm not going to send an intermediary.
I know.
I'm going to do it myself."
No, good point. Good point. So when you said that, it occurred to me, maybe that's why Rashi is using a shaliach and not the word malach. That since malachim, at least the major ones, actually have some level of identity. But there is another place where I believe the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire are referred to as malachim. That we should know that essentially a malach, normally we think of a malach, an angel, as sort of taking on human characteristics, and we should not be locked into that particular perception. Now that doesn't deal with what you're saying, and that's something that really does bear some consideration as to what is the Haggadah really trying to tell us there. Is the Haggadah saying to us that somehow level of intention and divine presence, that despite the fact that we still talk about the Malach HaMavet, and sometimes we refer to HaMechabel, the destroying one, but that somehow or other it still involved a very high level of divine intervention. I want to switch for 1 second, Shira Beth, because we had that conversation yesterday, which I'm considering publishing or not, because it was not the right passage where we talked about the sapphire, remember? And I became confused. So I went and looked at the sapphire. Afterwards, I went and looked at a sapphire stone and the incredible blue color it has. And you had asked me, this is why I'm addressing you particularly, why the sapphire? What's the significance of it? It has to do with the color. It has to do with the color blue, which represents heaven and also the sea, the color of the sea. And in some ways then refers to the divine presence. And that is precisely why we have this. We're told that the tchelet is to remind us of the color of the sea, which is to remind us of the color of the heavens, which is to remind us of the divine throne. And that's the reason why it's the sapphire.
Nice.
So I wanted to be sure to share that with you after trying to puzzle it out.
Is that why there's so much blue in where is it? What's the city? Up north in Israel.
It's fat.
Spot, yeah. They have a lot of blue in Spot.
Well, that may be intentional.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop the recording and say farewell to those who are following this. Thank you.